Most people spend years searching for peace. What if the thing stealing your peace isn't stress, isn't failure, isn't other people? What if it's the one thing you're refusing to release? Why does losing something hurt twice more than gaining it? Behavioral economics has an uncomfortable answer. Human beings feel the pain of losing something twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. You felt it before. The job you kept applying to even after 10 interviews failed. The person you still think about years later. The house you thought you'd buy by 30, but never happened. This is not a character flaw, it is ancient, survival-driven wiring. It is the exact same instinct that kept your ancestors from abandoning their tribe, their shelter, and their fire in the dead of winter. But here is the unseen problem with the modern world. That biological wiring designed to protect your physical life is now the very thing silently destroying your mental life. It makes you cling to relationships that ended years ago. It anchors you to past versions of yourself that no longer exist. It forces you to obsess over outcomes you cannot control and people who have already moved on. You are holding on to ghosts. And to protect your ego, you call it loyalty, you call it love, you call it resilience. The ancient Stoics had a very different word for this behavior. They called it bondage. Here is the dangerous truth about attachment that nobody tells you. It does not actually begin in the heart, it begins in the mind. Specifically, in the stories your mind tells you about what you require in order to simply be okay. And once your mind decides it needs something, it will distort reality to protect that belief. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It is the uncomfortable tension that arises when reality contradicts what you have convinced yourself must be true. So, you rationalize, you minimize red flags. You revisit the same conversation 100 times in your head, searching for a different outcome. You stay in the draining dynamic or the broken situation. Not because it actually serves your future, but because letting go would force you to admit that you were wrong about it from the very beginning. This is the hidden architecture of human suffering that modern self-help content almost never touches. The pain is rarely about the external circumstance itself. It is about the identity you have wrapped around that circumstance. When a relationship ends, or a career fails, many people do not just lose the person or the paycheck. They lose a version of themselves. They lose the person who was loved by that individual, the person who was guaranteed that future, the person who believed in that particular story. The hardest part of letting go is not losing the thing itself. It's losing the future you imagined around it. And that loss of identity is often far more painful than the loss of the relationship itself. The mind experiences this loss of identity like a death, and grief naturally follows. You cycle through denial, bargaining, and anger. But here is where people become dangerous to themselves. Many get permanently trapped in the bargaining stage. They spend years negotiating with a reality that has already moved on without them. The result is years surrendered to a reality that has already disappeared. They remain chained to a past that no longer exists, while life quietly moves on without them. The Stoics were not cold people. This is perhaps the most persistent misunderstanding about Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius was a man who buried multiple children, fought wars and governed an empire on the edge of collapse. He was not a man without feeling. He was a man who had learned how to feel without being consumed. In his private journal, Meditations, he wrote something that cuts directly to the core of this conversation. He understood something most people never do. Everything you love is on loan. He reminded himself, repeatedly, that the things we love are temporary. He did not do this to generate misery, he did it to generate presence. He used to practice the Stoics called memento mori, the deliberate awareness of impermanence. He used it not as a morbid exercise, but as a way to actually be alive to what he had, while he had it. Epictetus took this further. Born a slave, a man who had literally nothing he could call his own, he became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome. His framework rested on a single distinction: the separation between what is up to us and what is not up to us. External outcomes, the opinions of other people, the arc of events, these are not up to us. Our judgments, our responses, our values, these are up to us. He did not teach detachment as indifference, he taught it as precision. You detach from what you cannot control, so that you can fully commit to what you can. This is not passive surrender. It is something far more difficult. It is the choice to direct your energy only where it actually has the power to create something. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius, offered a quieter version of the same truth. He observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. He noted that the mind, left untrained, tends to live in futures that have not arrived, or pasts that have already dissolved. The antidote to this suffering, he argued, was not optimism, it was contraction. The deliberate pulling of attention back into the present moment, the present task, the present breath. True detachment, in the Stoic sense, is not about becoming someone who does not care. It is about becoming someone who cares about the right things, with the right intensity, and knows exactly when to release the rest. So how do you actually practice this? Not as philosophy, but as a daily discipline. Right now, pause. What is one thing you are still holding on to that is already gone? Name it. Say it out loud. That is where your freedom begins. The first practice is to separate the event from your story about the event. When something upsets you, pause before responding. Not to suppress the feeling, but to examine what you have added to the situation. The event itself is neutral data. What creates suffering is the story you lay on top of it. You tell yourself, this means I am a failure. You tell yourself, this proves no one respects me. You tell yourself, this is always how it goes for me. That layering is where the damage happens. The Stoics called this prosoche, self-observation. When you notice the story forming, name it. Tell yourself, I am telling myself a story that this means I am inadequate. Not every thought deserves your belief. That single act of naming creates distance between you and the narrative, and distance is where freedom begins. The second practice is to establish a grief window and then close it. Detachment does not mean you skip the pain. Skipping pain is suppression, and suppression is just delayed suffering. Instead, give yourself a defined period to fully feel what you feel. Start with 15 minutes. Set a timer. Sit with the loss, the anger, the disappointment. Sit with it fully. Don't run from it. When it rings, you stand up and do one physical thing. Then, when the window closes, you do not return. This is not denial. It is a declaration that the emotion has been honored, and does not need to colonize every hour that follows. The Stoics believed in processing grief with dignity, and then choosing to continue living with equal dignity. The third practice is to redirect your mind through action, not thought. The mind left idle will return to what it is clinging to. Rumination is not processing, it is a loop. The most effective way to break the loop is not to think your way out of it, but to move your way out. Engage the body, engage a project, engage a person who needs something from you. Service is one of the most underrated tools for detachment. It forces your attention outward, and reveals that the world is larger than the wound you have been orbiting. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire when he could have retreated into grief. He did not do it because it was easy. He did it because he believed action was the only dignified response to circumstance. There is a version of you that is not defined by what you are holding on to. Not defined by the relationship that ended, the opportunity that passed, the person who did not choose you, or the version of yourself you thought you would be by now. That version of you is not waiting somewhere in the future. It becomes available the moment you release your grip. The Stoics weren't trying to feel less. They were trying to be free. Freedom begins with loosening the hands. The river was never meant to be controlled, only crossed. And the moment you stop chasing what's already left, you become available for what is still coming. Because you matter more than any ghost.